Vaswani, and this is Fulbright Women Podcast Season 2. We're excited to bring to you 20 new brilliant women who are pushing the boundaries in their fields and lives and serving as inspirations to so many around them. Joining us today is Anuje Farhung. Anuje is a Pakistani fashion designer, creator, and educator whose work is currently directed towards material symbiosis and regeneration. She did her MFA in fashion design from Savannah College of Art and Design. And she has been doing some exciting things at the forefront of apparel and textile design, as well as synthetic biology in Pakistan. And today we're going to talk about all of it, including her fashion label, House of Farhung.
Hi.
Hi, Anuje. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you. There's so much to talk about, but I guess my first question, Anuja, would be, when was the first time you noticed your interest in fabrics?
Oh, since a very young age, I was very obsessed with art and design and knew I wanted to go into fashion since I was a kid. I was very nerdy and I was very determined. I remember I had a solo trip that my parents were very kind enough to let me go on when I was 15, I think, in England. And first thing I wanted to do was go to Central St. Martin's, which is a very renowned fashion university, because I was so determined to go there. And I was obsessed. And it was like the best day of my life going through catalogs. So, I mean, I've known since a very young age that I love fabric and I love design and just being creative.
What is that first memory that you have, and what do mention the age, which was your aha moment. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think since I was a baby, like since I was 5 or 6, I would see my mom dress up and I would see my dadi dress up, my grandmother, and I would it was wonderful to see them wear these like amazing clothes that they would go to the tailor and get made. And just that process when they drag you along as a kid, it was so fascinating. And so, yeah, by the time I was 15 and I went to England, the first thing I did was tell my aunt, take me to St. Martin's so I can look at the fashion programs, because I think I was just obsessed with fashion by then.
One thing to be, fascinated by different things when you're a kid. And obviously, there's like a spectrum. Some things you attract you more, some things not so much. But it's a completely different thing to know at a very young age that this is something you want to be making a career in. Was that the thing with you?
Yeah, no. So something that I know about myself now at this age is that, yes, I have made decisions and then stuck by them for years. And so, yeah, I knew at a very young age that I wanted to go in art and design, and that didn't change. When people are like, oh, she's going to grow out of it. No. Yeah.
You mentioned, and I think a lot of us have those memories of, just going to the tailors with our mothers, our grandmothers, and just playing around while there's, just designing with the tailors, whatever, right? That makes me think about how things have changed now, right? In comparison to how they were back in our mothers or grandmothers' time when we were kids.
Absolutely.
Now we're, what is your biggest kind of observation in terms of the change that we see in the fashion world?
So I like to say that third world countries, and there are plenty of articles about this as well, not just about fashion, but I like to say it's this McDonald's culture that kind of we've appropriated in the past few decades, especially in our lifetime. I feel like this idea of fast fashion, fast food, mass brands, major conglomerates, this is a very new concept, because if you think about it, in an older generation, it was very much making and crafting and, kind of doing it in such a leisurely way. And it was such an effort. And you were involved so much in the process, and everything was local, that it wasn't something where you were just grabbing something every 2 weeks. And obviously we know this about fast fashion, that it's tempting beyond belief, because there's something new. These companies are very informed. They know what women want. They know what people want. And they will market to that, they will design according to that, and it's about large profits and huge turnovers, and they're making things abundantly, or and so much, it's such massive quantities that there's nowhere to keep up. So it's a lot of options which people love, but there's no idea of the consequences of that, which,
Yeah, true. There's so many consequences to it, and we're going to get to, one major one that you've been working on. But before we get to that, something you said is really right. This whole, kind of appropriating the whole, McDonald culture, like you put it, wanting things, as quickly as possible, just the abundance of so many things, it affects a lot of stuff, your attention span, your ability to value things. Back for my mother, I remember, for my grandmother, right, they would value each item that they had, right, that would come out on special occasions, and it would be like a treat, and you could see that delight. I don't see that anymore. People, this whole thing of, and I'm no way trying to generalize it, but we do see this segment of people who would be very excited about wearing something, but they're going to wear that once or twice, and that's it. It's gone, right? It's forgotten. What is this attitude?
But something, I mean, to be fair, I also understand the appeal of these things, right? The idea is that they are available to the masses in a price point that they appreciate. All these huge brands that we have in Pakistan, without naming a few, they're affordable. Let's be honest. So a woman who is busy, or a man who is busy, who has a certain amount of money that they can spend and a certain amount of time, they're certainly going to think about that, right? That in the same price point, I'm getting something that's ready, it's pretty, it's available. So I understand the pull of it, especially the economical value of it. Other than that, yes, there is a large attitude towards consumption, overconsumption, not valuing what we have. And I feel like the truth is we're all kind of guilty of that, because there's so many options available to us. And, sustainability, or the idea of that, is not just environmental friendliness. It's also taking care of the people that work in a business, and how we're kind of elongating business or a job for them in the future, and how that quality of work, work-life balance is there. And so I feel like, when we think of our tailors and our artisans and our kaam karne wale, we kind of forget that, because at times it really is easier just for us to go to this major brand, pick something up, and be done with it.
Yeah. And that could be, applied. We could put a lens of, just local designers, as well as like international designers who go down to developing countries. And, there is an element of exploitation involved there. You've been working in this field for such a long time, right? And forget about even like before you started actively working in the field, you were fascinated about the field as a kid. When was the first time this bitter, facet of the industry was exposed to you? When was that first time you realized, oh my God, this is also a reality?
Well, when I went to SCAD, to do my MFA in fashion, I think that's when, and I feel the truth is that first world countries are much better at policing and realizing that this is a huge problem. I mean, I'm in no way have they solved this problem, but I feel like third world countries are, there's this attitude of like, people are dying hungry, we don't care. We don't want to hear about clothes. But the truth is, we will also die hungry if we don't figure out how to save the land we live in. And that's very interconnected to the waste that we produce. So yeah, once I went for my grad program and degree, I learned a lot about fast fashion, and you become aware of ethical policies and transparency in business and why it's important, and greenwashing and all these things that I wasn't aware of before, and all these humongous companies that we love to kind of go abroad and shop with, because again, it's affordable, it's lovely, it has all the clothes that we want, but we don't really think about the consequences, and especially in our own countries. So yeah, I think once you are studying this and you are becoming aware of it, especially when you think about larger conglomerates that are internationally available, it's something that comes to mind.
Yes, it is really interesting. Something that you just mentioned is, and I want you to expand on it. I agree with you that a lot of people in the developing countries, and we can sit to psychoanalyze that as well, that as the whys behind it. But a lot of people really are not thinking about the, effects and the consequences of the malpractices happening in the fashion world within the developing country. I agree with you on that part. But something that you said about the developed world, where, I know there are conversations happening, but there's also this facade of, sustainability, let's just say, or being eco-friendly, or being, not really exploiting anyone. There's a facade to it in the developed country as well. And there are conversations happening around that as well.
I mean, you are right, but that's the thing, right? They're calling companies out on it, especially very large companies. People were quick to call them out. In Europe, there's, quite a government issue of how companies are run and sustainability policies. So there's more policing about it and a little harder to get away with it. Not that they've not solved the problem, but at least it's a conversation. There are steps being taken. WHO and UN organizations, it's a whole platform, and working towards the betterment of, especially when it comes to fashion, towards environment. But of course, I mean, we can absolutely say that there are so many companies that will greenwash, right? They will just have a facade because they're earning in billions. So they'll spend a couple of millions on a good campaign, but then they're going to have factories in Bangladesh where there are people dying. So I agree, but I feel like we are so many steps behind that, and since we are the countries that will not get saved, that will not get any sympathy, we're the ones who really should think about it. And I feel like our culture is very sustainable, used to be very sustainable. If you look at your rural lifestyle, what is it? Availing what we have, hand making, seasonal making, not wasting, using local sources. Where did that all go, right? If you look at your urban lifestyle and this McDonald's culture that we're talking about, it wasn't ours to begin with. Darzi ke paas jana, why is it such a tradition? Because it was something that was carried on, and it was, you're giving business to someone local, you are sourcing locally, and because it's such a process, you're not doing it every week. You're not going to a shop and just, it's a process. So I feel like these are things that we're very far removed from now. And I feel like environmental problems are not something we can just ignore anymore. We have to, and by no means am I perfect. By no means am I educated in every nuance of sustainability. By no means am I someone who's done like 8 years of research, none of that. But I feel like if you don't start somewhere, I mean, look at South Africa, look at Cape Town. Who came to their rescue? I don't think anyone came to their rescue. I don't think anyone remembers that they had a water crisis, because the honest truth is when it's not happening to you, you forget about it.
Right. Okay, now that we can actually get into, the core of what we really want to talk about today, is let's just segue into that. You, I know, are passionate about synthetic biology as well, right? And we talk a lot about fast fashion. We've already mentioned that in our conversation right now. Mm-hmm. And I know it is second only to oil as the world's, largest polluter. 60% of fast fashion ends up in a landfill, right? When was the first time you started thinking about this bit?
Well, when I came back to Pakistan, I knew that I wanted to work, and I thought about opening up my own business, and I started House of Farhung. I'm also an adjunct professor. I was teaching. So, when you're a student, you have all these very great ideals and, these utopian ideas, and you've never run a business and you have no idea about anything. But one thing I knew was that I wanted to be sustainable, but, it's such a abstract term. What does that mean? So I thought, okay, I'm going to locally source. I'm going to use organic materials. I'm going to use really have workers that are well paid, well treated, and really have them in all the process, give them credit where credit is due. I thought about some things, but then when you're running a business, you realize, okay, well, everything doesn't work out the way you want it to, and maybe you're treating your workers well, but your materials, are they truly organic? Are they truly sourced well? Where did they come from? Where do they go? And everything that is used in embroidery, there's so much synthetic material, and obviously it ends up somewhere, right? So I don't have a solution for that. And so all these things were things I was thinking about as I was running my business, and thinking, okay, well, I mean, am I truly as sustainable? And like, are other businesses that claim to be sustainable, just because they use local artisans, are they truly sustainable when it comes to environment? How sustainable can I be? How sustainable can a business truly be in Pakistan? And so I don't know, all these questions came up to me, and I feel like once the pandemics hit, it was such a shock, and it was especially for small businesses, it was such a horrible time where there's suspension and work was off. And so I feel like I just availed that opportunity to kind of follow through on this and start thinking about how can I be truly more sustainable than I'm trying to be.
Okay, hold on. You mentioned, and this is really important because things are nuanced and complex, right? And when we are just starting out, yes, we do come up with, all these like, oh, we're going to change the world. But then, life hits you and you're like, oh my God, there's a lot before I get to changing the world, right? So explain it to, me and people who are listening who don't understand much about this world. You mentioned fabrics and materials. Do all kind of fabrics use non-biodegradable synthetics and materials? How does it work?
So it's so complicated because think about it. So, and when I say organic fabric, it means something that is biodegradable. It's friendly, right? So let's say 100% cotton, 100% silk, because it is made through a natural process. But when you think about it, how is that silk made? How is that cotton made? The carbon footprint, the water waste, the toxic chemicals, how it's transported, were the people treated fairly? There's so much that goes through this process, right? From beginning to end, what we call a supply chain. So for me, the other thing is that it was so hard to think about, if you're even sourcing organic material, you don't know about that process. Sure, it's 100% cotton, but has it been through that process? And then the dyeing process, by the way, that's also toxic chemicals, and they're not natural dyes. And then where's that going? So there's so much to it, and it's honestly, I haven't figured out a solution for everything either. That's the whole point, that it's such a loophole of thinking what is organic, what is not. A lot of materials that you wouldn't even know it, but they're, when it says like 50% polyester, that's man-made. So when it's mixed with, let's say, 50% wool, which is natural, it's still combined. And you have to find a way, if you truly want for it to decompose, you have to find a way to separate, and then find a way to safely dispose of the polyester, or recycle it, upcycle it, and then truly dispose of the wool without leaving a mess behind. And so, there's so much to it. Not every plastic is not biodegradable. A lot of materials use plastic. Um, a lot of chemicals are not biodegradable. A lot of biodegradable materials that claim to be biodegradable are not biodegradable unless they go through a very specific process, which they don't. So they're just as harmful. So it's greenwashing when people are like, oh, we're using biodegradable materials, but they don't really decompose. So it's complicated. So it's a lot that goes into this.
Easier to, go the other route. Is that why you think a lot, majority of the people are not thinking about it?
Absolutely. Like, I just gave a list of things that I have no control over. You go to the market, you get a shalwar of raw silk. Please tell me where that raw silk came from. Right? Where was it made? How was it made? How are you going to make sure it's ethically sourced? So, of course, it's easier. Also, pure materials are more expensive. That's the truth. I can tell you, if you go to the market and you get pure organza, it's, let's say, 500 rupees to 1,000 rupees more expensive than something that's just synthetic.
And that's
So
another
someone,
thing which you just said, that you're not even sure if it's pure just because someone is
exactly.
claiming, right?
And so you can go and you're like, okay, well, I wanted the butter and I just don't want to spend that much money. It's $200, just fine. I'll take the synthetic one.
What can be done? I'm sure you must have, studied about it. You must be thinking about personalism. What can be done to create transparency around, the fashion industry and those who make tall and false claims of having sustainable brands?
That is a very good question and a very complicated one, because that's too large a problem for me to solve. And that's exactly what I thought about, that how much can I do and practically what can be done. I feel like, one, companies that have a textile production mill which would be using methods to make pure fabrics would be great. The thing is, look, profitability. We care about profitability more than anything else. Unfortunately, that's the truth. So companies that think, and having a good business means do have profit. Please be smart about it. Don't lose profit, but don't punish the world in your process of profit. So of course, the process of how you're creating, the education required to engineer such a process where waste isn't done or recycling is done or smart methodology is used to not waste water, to not waste resources, to not have a carbon footprint. That has to be thought about. And there are wonderful companies in the world that are doing that. They have labs in their factories, in their offices, where they're building materials to be more organic or be more biodegradable, be environmentally friendly. There are a lot of specific actions that are being taken, but unfortunately, Pakistan does not hold much care on that. I'm sure there are actually there are small businesses that are trying. I won't say that. There are lots of small businesses, younger artisans and designers who are interested in being sustainable, and they're trying their best. And I think that's very encouraging. But of course, the real cincher of the deal would be if our larger conglomerates would care a bit more, since they're the ones producing the most and earning the most. So if they would actually care about taking care of people and Pakistan generally, that would help.
Let's talk about House of Farhang and your personal, practice in fashion. How have you tried to incorporate biomateriality and sustainability in your fashion, in your, journey?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. Again, I feel like with biomaterials, I started experimenting, and especially with 3D softwares, because we are in the age of metaverse and we are in the age of using digital fashion. And so that was something that really interested me. And I started producing these looks and playing with softwares. And I was and am experimenting with biomaterials. And I kept thinking about these amazing prototypes. Honestly, for me, it was a great time because it was a lot of playing. It was like being in school again, because once you're working, it's a very practical process, right? So as I was playing and producing these cool projects and materials, I kept thinking, well, hold on, where's the practicality in this? So I really thought about something that I wanted to do. Was I wanted to make something or material that could be symbiotic, or it could be biodegradable, but it could also have maybe a living, breathing process. And that's something I'm still working on. But that led me to look for collaborations, because I have all these ideas. And the truth is, I would love to think that I can master everything and I am intelligent enough to master everything, but there are certain skill sets I don't have. So I started looking for collaborators. And I will say this, it's really, the world moves forward. People are willing to work. And I feel like there's a very closed off attitude, हमारे लोगों में कि engineer is an engineer and a doctor is a doctor, and they cannot, they're blinders on their eyes, they can't move left and right. And that's not how the world works. You have skills, you have a brain. Who told you that you can't move left and right? I like to tell my kids that what is the difference between you and an average darzi? And they'll have lots of answers, and I'll tell them that honestly speaking, he's better than you. He's better than me. He stitches 10 jodas a day. I do not. I will clearly tell you this. His stitching is better than my stitching. But do you know what I have that he generally won't have? Ideas. Okay, like generally I will say, okay, well, why don't we move this here and do this? And they'll be flabbergasted because they're taught one thing. They're usually taught, it's here and here and that's it. So if you have the education and you have the skill set, you should be able to broaden your horizon. So getting back to the topic, I looked for collaborators, and I feel like I found an amazing one in Sarah Khan. She's a synthetic biologist from Peshawar, and she was really enthusiastic. She's very humble. She's done some amazing projects. She was very sweet in, hearing me out, and I really admired that she wanted to work and she wanted to do something, and she heard me and my ideas. And she actually said something really important to the lines of what you said, that we have to create something practical, and we should address something that is a problem in Pakistan. It shouldn't just be an experimental something that we think up, and that's exactly what I was thinking as well. And I thought, yes, absolutely. And I just threw out the word. We had some
Brainstorming.
Storming sessions.
That's
and we were just like working ideas. And I threw out the word biosequence. And that's where we went from, because it's something that we use abundantly. It's something that is a huge problem. And Pakistan is, king of sequence. We love our wedding wear, and we love our formal wears. And yeah, it was something practical.
What was one of the first challenges that you had to encounter?
I think Corona and her being in a different city, her lab being there, me being here, making independent samples because we were both, kind of ahead in our research and knew what we wanted to do. Exchanging those samples, it was a lot of WhatsApping and Zoom calls and notes. Failures in our samples. There's a lot of practical detail, and bravo to the people who actually solved these things and have solved these things and created some wonderful products. But I still call it a prototype because you have to think about so many elements. Plastic is convenient. Let's be honest. Why is it convenient? It's cheap. It's durable. There are a lot of things and processes it can go through without being damaged. So if you're going to produce a product which is mimicking something that's already in the market, you really have to think about all those aspects, and cost and effectiveness, and who is your competitor, how are they doing? Because obviously if you have something that is a token product and can't really compete, then it doesn't really work. So yeah, we're still working on all those things, but these are the struggles of making those prototypes and the years process that we've been going through, and the testing, and hopefully in the future getting to our second stage, which was microbial dyeing. So we have a natural dyeing process with a symbiotic process. So yeah.
I understand that it's a work in process, and a fascinating one, right? But I'm sure while you're at it, you must be thinking about different things, which you've mentioned as well, some of them. Cost, right? I don't know much about it. I'm not an expert, but I assume, it would be in comparison to, readily available fast fashion and sequences and everything, it would be a little more on the expensive side, perhaps. Do you think about how to bring that cost down? Because we're talking about, a developing country again.
Absolutely. That is something that we are considering. Those are the things that we are working on and process and seeing how actual sequences developed. So yeah, these are all things that we're looking at. But obviously as an independent project, you have to realize that's why it takes so long, because we're two women working independently. We have our own jobs. I have other projects going. She has other projects going. I'm still very much enjoying my experimental work. So there's a lot of things that I'm interested in and want to play with. And I have other projects going with companies, hopefully. So it's a work in progress. And of course, we have thought about cost effectiveness. The material used to make these prototypes, manpower, or if machinery is used, how much time does it take, the costing. So the idea is, to practically, if in the future ever have this product, the idea would be that the costing shouldn't be more than 20-30% above market price. Obviously, it's going to be costlier, but it should be able to compete instead of being unreachable.
One thing in addition to, providing alternatives is also providing awareness and education so that people are actually, brought to that same level of actually thinking about that this is something that they should be, at least trying, if not opting for long term, right? One of the things that I think about is the shelf life, right? Clothes. If you're talking about biodegradability, the shelf life of clothes, how does that affect? Because हमें तो यही पता है ना कि वो दादी के कपड़े are kept, now it will be passed over to, passed on to someone else. What about that?
So absolutely, that is a huge thing that people are concerned with, because it is true that we have it's a very good tradition of passing on clothes, of trying to think of longevity, especially when we spend so much money. I think that's really important. So that is something that, I feel like anyone who is dabbling with biodegradable materials struggles with. What is the shelf life? So it's not just someone working on a smaller project like me. I think it's humongous projects done by amazing companies working on cactus leather and like mango fabric. That's one of the questions. But, that's also, I feel like, a lifestyle and way of thinking that needs to be addressed. So it's really interesting. I had an interview with BBC Urdu, and one of the things that they did was talk to these ladies in the streets. And that's, people, I think they would like to do good for the world. I don't think our people are that like vindictive that they wouldn't, but their practical concerns also make sense to them. It's like, well, how much will it cost? And if it's just going to disappear in 2 years, I'm not going to spend that much money. So yeah, these are things that need to be addressed and are being addressed. So, for us, it's a prototype because we are trying to make it have a larger lifespan. And hopefully we can.
Hopefully, yes. I personally will keep a tap on that in the future as well. What are some of the other projects that you're working on that you're really excited about?
Well, one of them that hopefully works out is with biomaterial and biosequence, with a European company that I really admire, but I can't mention it right now. Something personally that I'm very interested in and I'm learning and working on is robotics in fashion. So that's something that I want to be working on soon, which also delves into sustainability. Another project that I had worked and done swatches of is living material and matter. So how can your fabric actually be alive? And so there is another swatch that I'm working on with that. So honestly, just think of it as like a really fun science.
Yeah, I feel like all of these things just, just got me thinking, and I feel like it merits another episode of its own altogether.
Well, let's see if it works, Yeah. It's a lot of work, and then failure, and then trying to succeed again. So yeah.
That's where the fun is, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Anuje. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today. I had so much fun.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely talking to you. I really hope that maybe this helps just spread a tiny bit of awareness and, get the conversation started, which I think is the most important thing.
Much needed.
If we start from somewhere, we will get somewhere. That's the truth, even if it takes a long time. If we just give up and say, "Bhai, ye to ho hi nahi sakta, no point," then we won't get anywhere. So yeah, hopefully.
Sure, slow and steady.